Good evening, and welcome to the very first episode of Facts Matter under the second Trump administration. I still almost can't believe I'm saying that out loud. Regardless, though, on Monday, January the 20th, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. And almost immediately, he got to work on implementing his agenda, issuing roughly 200 executive orders, executive actions, proclamations, and memorandums within the span of just several hours. Let's go through several of them together as they relate to the federal workforce. To start with, in the early morning hours of Tuesday, President Trump issued the following statement over on his own social media platform, Truth Social. Quote, "Our first day in the White House is not over yet. My presidential personnel office is actively in the process of identifying and removing over 1,000 presidential appointees from the previous administration who are not in line with our vision to make America great again. Let this serve as official notice of dismissal for these 4 individuals, with many more coming soon." And then he goes on to list 4 specific names. They are as follows: Jose Andres from the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, Mark Milley from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, Brian Hook from the Wilson Center for Scholars, and Keisha Lance Bottoms from the President's Export Council. And then for added effect, right below that, he added the words, "You're fired," in all caps. Now, probably, besides Mark Milley, you likely don't know the other names mentioned. And so let's go through all of them together. To start with, General Mark Milley, although it's not clear whether he's a general anymore. We'll get to that in a second. But he was the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He held that position starting in October of 2019 during Trump's first term in office, and he held it up until September of 2023, well into Joe Biden's tenure. And while the political left largely saw him as something of a hero for standing up to Trump, it might have actually been the case that Mark Milley potentially committed an act of treason. Specifically, during the tumultuous period following the 2020 election, Mark Milley had 2 phone conversations with his Chinese communist counterpart. Conversations, I should mention, that President Trump was not made aware of. The existence of these 2 phone calls were first revealed in a book titled Peril by Robert Woodward. And here's a short excerpt from that book detailing the exchange that took place between Mark Milley and General Lee Zuo-chun of the People's Liberation Army. Here's what the book states. Quote, "Over the phone, Mark Milley says, 'General Lee, I want to assure you that the American government is stable and everything is going to be okay. We are not going to attack or conduct any kinetic operations against you. General Lee, you and I have known each other for now 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise.'" Now, despite the obvious uproar regarding this revelation, the Biden White House refused to reprimand Mark Milley in any way. In fact, when this transcript was made public, the Biden White House press secretary at the time, Ms. Jen Psaki, she came out and defended Mark Milley by saying the following, quote, "The president has complete confidence in his leadership, his patriotism, and his fidelity to our Constitution." Furthermore, on his way out of office, Joe Biden gave Mark Milley a complete preemptive pardon against any retaliatory actions that Trump might take. And therefore, the actions that Trump has taken have been largely symbolic. He sent out a statement before he was inaugurated questioning whether or not Mark Milley was still a general, although apparently he can't remove that status from him. It's too late, but he's publicly questioning whether he is a general or not. Secondly, a portrait of Mark Milley was mysteriously removed from the Pentagon, although at the moment no one claims to know why it was done. And then more recently, Trump officially fired Mark Milley from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. Then, next up is Mr. Jose Andres, who was fired from the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. Now, Jose is a Spanish-American chef, as well as the founder of the Global Food Institute at the George Washington University. Ostensibly, for his humanitarian work, Joe Biden awarded him the Medal of Freedom just last month. However, Mr. Jose Andres has also been an outspoken critic of Trump for nearly a decade now. And the story is quite interesting. 10 years ago, Jose Andres signed a contract with the Trump Organization to open up a full-scale restaurant within the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. However, in June of 2015, when Trump made some disparaging remarks regarding Mexicans who were coming across the U.S. southern border, Mr. Jose Andres, he decided to pull out of the lease and to break the contract with the Trump Organization. The Trump organization decided to sue him for $10 million. Mr. Andres countersued them back, and eventually in 2017, they wound up settling the case. And that was basically the end of the story. That is, up until 2 days ago, when Trump went ahead and fired Mr. Andres from his position on the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. Although, shortly after that was made public, Mr. Andres released a statement of his own saying that the termination did not even really matter since, quote, I submitted my resignation last week. My 2-year term was already up anyway. Meaning, as a practical matter, that the statement from Trump was largely symbolic. Regardless, next on the list was Mr. Brian Hook, who was fired from the Wilson Center for Scholars. Now, Brian Hook, he actually served as Trump's envoy to Iran during his first term. At the time, when he served under the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Mr. Hook was a proponent of using sanctions to apply maximum pressure against Iran, which was actually a stated policy of President Trump himself. Now, I'm not exactly clear on the significance of getting him fired. If you have any insight regarding Mr. Hook, please leave it in the comments section below, because both myself and probably everyone watching this video would appreciate it, because I can't really understand why he would be fired, because at the time, it seemed like his position on Iran was exactly what Trump's position on Iran was. He was very hawkish, and it seems like moving into 2025, Trump is still hawkish against Iran, and so Brian Hook's position seems to, still hold water. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. If you know, leave it in the comment section below. Regardless, the next person to be fired was Miss Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta, who was fired from the President's Export Council. Although it's worth mentioning that just like the chef, Mr. Jose Andres, it appears that Miss Keisha Bottoms had also already resigned 2 weeks ago. So her firing was also largely symbolic. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce today's sponsor, which is an awesome company called Patriot Mobile. For well over a decade, Patriot Mobile has unabashedly been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And when I say only, I really mean it. They're the only one. They're an awesome company that values getting real information out to the public, which is, of course, why they sponsor a channel like ours. And also, by switching your cell phone plan to Patriot Mobile, you're essentially voting with your dollars. That's because, unlike the other companies, every dollar you spend with them, it goes to support the First and the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, as well as U.S. veterans and first responders. They're a company that actually supports traditional American values, both in principle, but also in their real-world actions. And the best part is that the service is actually good. They have solid nationwide coverage because they operate on all 3 of the major networks. 100% of their customer service staff is based right here in America, and so talking to them is easy. You can keep your phone number, you can keep your phone, or you can actually upgrade your phone if you so wish, and they make the entire switching process super simple. Basically, if you currently have cell phone service, you can get cell phone service with Patriot Mobile with a coverage guarantee. And so consider making the switch. Just head on over to patriotmobile.com/Roman, or you can just call 972-PATRIOT. And best of all, if you use promo code Roman, they'll give you a free month of service. Again, that's promo code Roman, ROMAN. I'll also throw their details. They'll be down in the description box below. Now, it's really worth highlighting that these 4 individuals were only the ones who happened to be named in Trump's public statement. Besides them, over 1,000 different individuals are currently under review by the Trump administration's Presidential Personnel Office. But then also, besides just these 1,000 plus names, President Trump also signed an executive order which will give him the ability to fire a lot more federal employees. Quote, President Donald Trump signed a detailed executive order late Monday in the Oval Office that's intended to make it easier to fire poor performers among the managerial ranks of the 2.3 million members of the career federal workforce. The executive order, which is titled Restoring Accountability to Policy Influencing Positions Within the Federal Workforce, is expected to remove many of the civil service regulations and processes that currently make it a costly and time-consuming ordeal to remove a career employee. Essentially, it restores something known as Schedule F, and this is how Schedule F will work. Within the government, there are hundreds of political appointees who come and go with different administrations. These are the 1,000 plus people who are currently being reviewed by the administration. However, besides these political appointees, there are also tens of thousands of career bureaucrats who work in the government regardless of who happens to be president. They stay in office regardless of whether there is a Democrat or a Republican administration. Now, in theory, these people are considered to be non-political employees who just have the technical expertise to do their specific jobs. However, Trump's argument is that these career bureaucrats, they can be fired even if they do a bad job, and also, despite being technically apolitical, they might actually be undermining the administration in subtle ways within their own limited domains. And so, Schedule F changes all this. Schedule F would give the president the ability to convert some of these career bureaucrats into political appointments, making them easier to fire. Essentially, it would strip job protections from many federal workers and create a new class of political employees. According to one analysis that was conducted before the 2024 election, this change would affect roughly 50,000 federal employees. 50,000 employees whose jobs are now going to be scrutinized by the Trump administration. And it's worth mentioning that this is not the first time that President Trump did this, although the last time he did it, it was so late into his term that the changes never actually materialized. Quote, "The new executive order resurrects and makes multiple amendments to the controversial Schedule F executive order Trump signed near the end of his first term in the White House. That executive order was initiated by his Office of Management and Budget Director, Russ Vought, but it was issued too late to have any measurable impact on federal workers. However, this time it's being initiated literally on day number 1, and also it's worth mentioning that Mr. Russ Vought is being put back into place to get the job done. Trump nominated him to, once again, lead the Office of Management and Budget, and that position is quite important. Quote, "The Office of Management and Budget Director has authority second only to that of the chief executive in shaping executive branch personnel policy," meaning as a practical matter that we can expect to see a lot of people getting fired in the near future. Now, the Democrats, by and large, are opposed to this Schedule F reclassification change. And along that line, this man right here, Democrat Congressman Gary Connolly, he is spearheading the effort against Trump's Schedule F change. In fact, several days before Trump was even inaugurated, Congressman Connolly, he introduced a bill to Congress that would essentially nullify Schedule F. That bill, which you can see up on your screen, is called the Saving the Civil Service Act, and it would bar, quote, "any career position created after September 20th of 2020 from being reclassified outside of merit system principles without the express consent of Congress." However, here's where things get very different from Trump's first term in office. Very likely, because Trump and his team had 4 full years to prepare the language of all the executive orders very carefully, it appears that they actually preemptively countered these Democratic attacks. That's because, unlike the Schedule F executive order that was issued 5 years ago during Trump's first term, Trump's new executive order includes a major change. Here's specifically what part of the new executive order issued just 2 days ago says, quote, "Employees in or applicants for scheduled policy career positions are not required to personally or politically support the current president or the policies of the current administration. They are required to faithfully implement administration policies to the best of their ability, consistent with their constitutional oath and the vesting of executive authority solely in the president. Failure to do so is grounds for dismissal." And so this language in the executive order, it makes it such that federal bureaucrats can be fired for not doing their job properly rather than be fired for not being ideologically aligned with the administration. They don't have to be ideologically aligned, but they do have to do their jobs faithfully. Trump's team, they likely saw the weakness in their previous attempt at implementing Schedule F, and therefore they added this new language the second time around. Also, given the fact that the House is currently in the hands of the Republicans, any efforts to undermine this Schedule F change will require at least some Republican support, which is not impossible, but at least this early in the term, on such a seemingly minor issue, it would be very surprising to see any Republicans in the House support a Democrat effort to limit Trump's agenda. I guess you can never say never, but it would be unlikely. Regardless, that's what's happening in regards to the federal workers. 4 high-profile individuals were fired unceremoniously. Over 1,000 more are currently actively being reviewed, and soon 50,000 more individuals are also going to be reviewed. And that is, by the way, on top of several other major actions that Trump took on his very first day in office regarding the federal workforce. For instance, on day number 1, Trump issued an executive memo ordering all executive employees to return to the office. Essentially, he ended the 5-year-long COVID-era work-from-home situation. And interestingly, there will almost certainly be a percentage of these work-from-home employees who will just opt to take their severance package and leave rather than return to the office, which will then actually contribute to Trump's other goal of shrinking the federal workforce overall. Also, on his first day in office, President Trump instituted a federal hiring freeze. This freeze is fairly broad, and it applies to all, quote, federal civilian employees throughout the executive branch. Although it is worth mentioning that this executive order specifically does not apply to the military, to immigration agents, as well as to national security personnel, meaning that that Army recruiter hanging around in the mall will still be there recruiting. But this hiring freeze does apply to everyone else. The stated thinking behind this particular action is to stop hiring any more federal workers until the newly created DOGE conducts a full review of all the federal agencies and draws up a plan to cut down on government waste and mismanagement. Until that's completed, no more federal employees can be hired. And during this interim 90-day period, if there are any urgent positions that desperately need to be filled, well, this Trump memo, it states that the government department heads need to start getting creative. Quote, in carrying out this memorandum, the heads of executive departments and agencies shall seek efficient use of existing personnel and funds to improve public services and the delivery of these services. Meaning, in a practical sense, that the leaders of these different agencies and departments now need to think more like private enterprise entrepreneurs. Instead of just getting more employees and more funding handed to them, they have to instead take the employees and the funding they already have and get more creative with it to solve their problems. And so, there you have it. Within just a short 3-day period, you have tens of thousands of government workers who are now on the chopping block, while at the same time, there is a hiring freeze, ensuring that the government will not get larger while Elon Musk and his DOGE conducts a full audit. If you'd like to go through the details of anything that we discussed in today's episode, I'll throw my reference notes down into the description box below, which I should mention is that same description box right below those like and subscribe buttons, both of which I hope you take a quick moment to smash. And lastly, in case you didn't know, the Epoch Times actually publishes a phenomenal magazine called American Essence. It's great. It has no subversive communist nonsense. It's just pure Americana, just like the magazines from the 1950s. Just great interviews with American legends, tips on gardening, decorating your house, and just generally, the team behind this magazine, in every single issue, they explore how traditional values are being lived out in the modern real world. It's really a good magazine, and I bring it up for 2 reasons. One is that if you want to subscribe, you can do so. I'll throw the link to do so. It'll be down there in the description box below. You can get it delivered directly to your doorstep. But secondly, I want to surprise the team who works in this magazine. If you happen to be watching this video, and you are somehow in any way connected with Melania Trump's team, specifically the people responsible for booking her for interviews, please reach out to me. Just email faxmatter@epochtimes.com. It was kind of a running joke during Trump's first term in office that his wife, who used to literally be a superstar model, was completely ignored by almost every single magazine. And so this time around, it would be great if American Essence could do a solid front page interview with her. And so if you know anyone, or if you yourself happen to be the person who books Melania for these things, reach out to me. It's faxmatter@epochtimes.com, and let's make it happen. And with that aside, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.